Lord, yakan dyan.
Panare. Ayoko ng tahimik, ayoko ng pa-cute. Gusto ko ng laban, hindi yung puro mute. Mga kwento sa Senado parang teleserye. Ako ang bida, wag nyo kong maliitin. Sige, lahat ng lihim, ilabas nyo na. Ilawan ang dilim, wag nang magkunwari pa. Hastisya raw ang usapan, edi let's go, ipakita ang tapang. Shemenet, boom, sabog ang script. Walang atrasan dito, road trip. Shemenet, dugo sa mikropono. Thrill of the year, wag kang no-show. Shemenet, panoorin nyo ko. Pulang lipstick, tapang ko'y totoo. Drama! Shemenet, pero may kaso. I want a bloodbath. So let the try begin. Sino ang matitira kapag natanggal ang mastong laro ng kapangyarihan? Walang pasintabi. No task too big, kung may sala wag palusot. Kung inosente ka di ka dapat takot. Senador, congressman, lahat kasali. Bawal ang absentee sa haling tinali. TV ratings, babaunin ko kahit makipagdeba pa sa 5 heroin tulfo. Shemenet, boom, sabog ang script. Walang atrasan dito, road trip. Shemenet, dugo sa mikropono. Thrill of the year, wag kang no-show. Shemenet, panoorin nyo ko. Pulang lipstick, tapang ko'y totoo. Drama! Shemenet, pero may kaso. I want a bloodbath. So let the try begin.
Yo! O eto na nga. 5 Erwin Tulfo, 50 agad anak nun. Ito na nga. Gagi, it makes sense. Matalino pa ito si Tolentino, no? Sablay ka lang doon sa, ano mo kasi, sa ano mo yun, plataforma mo kung gusto niyo masakop tayo ng China, wag niyo ako iboto. Sablay ka doon, tol eh. Sablay ka doon, tol. Tol. Sayang. Sablay ka doon, tol. Tol. Pero dito hindi. It's enlightening yung sinabi mo. Tama nga. It makes sense. It actually coheres doon sa sinasabi ni Atty. Libayan na yung sinasabi natin na hindi mo pwedeng puwersahin yung mga bago na mag-agree doon sa hindi nila in-agree in the first place. May conflict of interest, di ba? Lungkot na sila sa impeachment na yan. Magpapasakop na tayo. Kamitayin nyo eh. Kamitayin nyo nga eh. Mali yun, tol eh. Sana hindi nagbalimbing si tol. Oo nga. Tumasarcastic pa kasi siya. Feeling ko kung di nga siya nag-alyansa, nanalo to si tol. Tol, mali kasi yung yung plataforma mo, tol eh. Kung gusto niyong sakupin ng China, wag niyo ako iboto. Mali yun, tol. Para kasi SB nun eh. Parang yung minsan na ako tatakbo, wag niyo sana sayangin. Parang mga ganun yung datingan, tol eh. Alam mo yun, tol? Mali eh. May problema tayo dun, tol eh. Di ba? may kakapalan ng konti, tol eh. Alam mo naman ang mga botante eh. Ayaw niya nung kakapalan mo eh. Mali yun, tol. Mali yung diskarte mong yun, tol. Nanalo ka sana, tol. Magaling. Ito. Sige to. Arrogant yung dating tol eh. May sumbat agad. Dapat sinabi mo na lang, pag di nyo ako binoto, para kayo nagtampo sa bigas. Asik na ata si auntie. May dudula sa briefing kanina. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng asik? Parang asik na. Ano ibig sabihin ng asik na? Actually, di ba, kumakapinta si Yusek, kala mo. Dahil pinapupunta dun yung mga tinuloy-tuloy nyo naman, kunyari ka pa. Kasi ngayon yung tamang gawin. Magdala kayo ng mga secretaries doon. Kasi sila naman yung nakakaalam talaga ng sagot doon eh. Ano ka lang doon, design with 5, limang, limang dangkal, limang dangkal na shoulder blade ha. Mas mababa ang kasi. Di ba? Ikaw naman. Display ka lang doon with checkered. Tapos may limang dangkal na shoulder blade. Hindi, sabi kasi ASIC na daw eh. Parang, ano ibig sabihin ng ASIC? Eh, ano lang yun. Tayo to, bumaba yun, di ba? Yung shoulder blades na ayaw magpakopya sa test. Di ba? Oh, sinasabi, daw yung mga secretaries. Oh, tinuloy-tuloy niya naman. Oh, di ba wala ka rin nagawa? Kasi yun nga yung tama. Tinuturuan na nga kayo, galit ka pa. Tinuturuan na nga kayo ng tama. Para naman gumanda image sa PBBM. Ayaw nyo pa rin. Model ka lang ng Pilipiniana. Tama. Alam mo, may duda ako eh. May duda ako si FL nagsusupply dito ng ano eh. Kung kay FL, pwede. Diba? Uy, nakita ko yung nakita ko yung pagsakay nila, presidente tsaka nila FL sa ano ba yun? Parang train ba yun? Simple lang naman sila, Hindi naman sila yung mukhang mayaman na Simple lang sila, parang yung mga anak parang yung typical na mga konyo na hindi naman gano'ng kayaman. Simple lang. Okay lang. Okay nga yung image nun, yung optics nun. Alalin ng sekretary yung ASEC, USEC may sariling hawak na agency. Correct, di ba? Ito, pakinggan na natin to. Let's go. Tol! Nangihinaya ako sa'yo, tol eh. Shoulder blade na parang... Hello, simple Lilani. Tol, nangihinaya ako sa'yo, tol eh. Ang galing mo dito, tol eh. Sino po FL? Dak ng tokwa naman lipoy. First lady, pre! First lady ba, pre? First lady. Anak ng tokwa ka naman, lipoy. Writer ka ba yan? MRT, yes, ganyan sila talaga. Oo nga, napakasimple lang ng nila. Francis Leo. Pre! FL! Demoted sa ACC. Lipoy Francis Leo. Nangaano ka pre? Nangihinayang na nga ako kay Tol. Nangihinayang pa ako sa'yo, Lipoy. Okay, let's go.
So thank you.
Nangihinayang na nga ako kay Tol. Nangihinayang pa ako. Sige, wag mo na mo. Isa-isa lang. Isa-isa lang araw-araw, pre. Pwede na gumamit ng utak, guys. Wag na mahiya, kayo na yung kay Andy, hindi pwede gumamit. First Lady Lisa Marcos,
Mr. President, for giving me your permission to make this manifestation on the topic touched earlier by our majority leader, Mr. President. This is the issue of whether the impeachment complaint transmitted by the House of Representatives to this Senate last February 5, 2025 can cross over to the Senate of the 20th Congress.
Ang ganda ng argument nito, it makes sense actually. It makes sense. Ewan ko, nakontent na ba ito ni Atty. Libayan? Guys, nakontent na ba ito ni Atty. Libayan? This is a very good argument eh. This is a very good argument. Parang, oo nga moment. Duda ko si GMA yung kausap ni Atty. Libayan na congressman. Huwag ka na magduda. Alam mo yung mga ganyang papsulo, yung may mga bagay na hindi mo kailangan hulaan eh. Kaya nga hindi sinasabi eh. Huwag mo na hulaan. Kayo naman, para kayo namang mga... kanina, some parts kahapon. Di ba this is a very good argument eh.
Well, Mr. President and my dear colleagues, doubts have been publicly expressed by certain personalities whether the trial of the impeachment complaint against the Vice President can continue or cross over into the 20th Congress.
Ah.
I wish to share and put on the record some of my thoughts on this particular issue.
Let's go.
Article 11, Section 3, Paragraph 6 of the Philippine Constitution provides that, and I quote, "The Senate shall have the sole power to try and decide
Dinala mo ba sa Supreme Court?
all cases of impeachment." Hence, this provision makes the Senate not just an impeachment court, but the impeachment court. An impeachment proceeding
Di ba kayo yung last session nila counted na as one impeachment, and now if continue nila, impeachment will be counted as another one? No, not technically. Not technically.
is sui generis.
Not technically. Guys, dito niya magagamit yung pragmatism. Okay? Yung mga yung mga may pragmatist hat dyan, this will make sense to you. Okay? Can it carry over? Yes. Can it convict Sara Duterte? No. Okay? May nuances tayo dito. Okay? Tanggal natin yung ambiguities. Can it cross over? It can. Does it have value? It doesn't. Okay, let's go.
That is
Yung mga pragmatist hat nyo dyan, wear it.
unique or a class of its own.
Sui
In
generis.
Republic versus Sereno, it is described as a proceeding exercised by the legislative as representatives of the sovereign to vindicate the breach of the trust reposed by the people in the hands of the public officer by determining the public officer's fitness to stay in office.
They can go either way. Ang argument dyan is pineframe ni Coco that they must, pero they are not required since sui generis.
While the
No, not only that. Kahit sa sarili niyang argumento, talo siya, gagi. Seryoso. Kahit sa sarili niyang argumento, talo siya.
form, procedure, and substantive arguments in impeachments remind us of a court trial. It also has the characteristics of a political process. The decision-making process in impeachment is not governed by any fixed or binding standard of proof, allowing for broad discretion on the part of the members of the impeachment court when they make their final decision on the case.
Good speech.
dis-
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, you read the brochure.
Decision makers or the members of the impeachment court can use any standard of proof they want, and this choice will not be subject to any review by any court except the court of public opinion, which is not technically a court. This fact
Ay, wow. Which is technically not a court. Well, you're not a court too. Come on, stop it.
gives the impeachment proceedings its political character. Hence, to better understand these sui generis impeachment proceedings, we need to look for analogies using well-known principles and
Analogies using well-known principles.
practices in other systems which are applicable to impeachment proceedings.
Okay. Based on this argument, we look around, right? What applies? Right? Hindi mo pwedeng ipuwersa yung gusto mo para kang Nico David nun. Para kang Nico David nun. May conclusion ka na, tapos nag-process of elimination ka pa. Sino bang niloloko? Talo na nga siya sa Marikina, mukhang talo pa sa speech.
As to the question of whether the impeachment trial conducted by the Senate in the 19th Congress or the impeachment complaint entertained by the Senate in the 19th Congress can cross over and continue into the 20th Congress, there is no provision in the 1987 Constitution or in the Senate Rules of Procedure on impeachment trials that expressly prohibits this.
Not expressly. So sadyang silent. Yung 1-year ban is magiging relevant based on how they treat the case when it carries over. If it treated newly filed, di pwede. Wala wala ako diyan, gagi. Wala ako diyan sa argumentong yan.
On the contrary, the Senate Rules on Impeachment support the position that the impeachment trial shall continue until final judgment.
And I will agree on that. This is the pragmatist in me kicking in. I agree on that. Okay? I agree on that.
Even if it is necessary to continue into the next Congress. Let me read the rules. Rule number 3. Upon presentation of the articles to the Senate shall specify the date and time for the consideration of such articles. Unless the Senate provides otherwise, it shall continue in session from day to day, except Saturdays, Sundays, and non-working holidays, until final judgment shall be rendered, and so much longer as may
Final judgment,
in its judgment be necessary. There is a contrary opinion that the rules of the Senate mandate that all pending matters and proceedings shall terminate upon the expiration of one Congress should take precedence over the cited rules on impeachment, which state that the trial shall continue until final judgment. The justification for the precedence given to the rules of the Senate is that the latter were passed by virtue of the power granted by the Constitution to the Senate to promulgate its rules. That is found in Article 6, Section 16, Paragraph 3, which provides each house may determine the rules of its proceedings. However, the Senate rules on impeachment were also passed by virtue of the power granted by the same Constitution to the Senate to promulgate its rules on impeachment. So, let us all look at Article 11, Section 3, Paragraph 8, which provides the Congress shall promulgate its rules on impeachment to effectively carry out the purpose of this section. In fact, there should be no conflict between the two rules because the rules of the Senate apply to legislative proceedings of the Senate, while the rules on impeachment apply to cases of impeachment. On this issue, the Supreme Court in the case of Pimentel Jr. versus Joint Committee of
Pimentel pa, no? Hindi pa naman nag-change ang
Congress ruled that the legislative functions of the 12th Congress may have come to a close upon the final adjournment of its regular sessions on June 11, 2004.
Okay.
But this does not affect its non-legislative functions.
Agree. Gagi. Kailangan mo lang lahat i-grant sa kanya. Pero may problema.
Conducting impeachment trials is most definitely not a legislative function. In fact, the section in the Constitution which speaks of impeachment is found in Article 11 under the title Accountability of Public Officers and not under Article 6, which is titled the Legislative Department. The conduct of impeachment trials, therefore, should not be affected by the final adjournment of the legislative session. Furthermore, we can use the analogy of the court system. Under the 1987 Constitution, the Senate is the impeachment court. The Senate in impeachment cases is more like a judicial body than a legislative one. Just like a court, the workload, caseload, or docket of the Senate as the impeachment court will not and should not be affected by a change in membership.
Okay. Alam mo kung ano kahinaan itong argumentong to. Gumamit ka ng analogy. Bakit ka gumamit ng analogy? Because you cannot argue it directly. So that's why you're using analogy. But false equivalence na kagad. So forward na natin. Ayoko marinig na yun sa korte.
But
Dahil false equivalence yan.
fully now
Gusto ko maging strictly logical lang tayo.
pending from the 19th Congress to Impeachment Court continues and remains to be the 19th of the current impeachment case now pending before the Senate of the 19th Congress.
So with generous nga eh. Kaya nga eh, wala na yan. Nag-ano ka na eh. Nag-analogy ka na eh.
Can cross over or continue from the 19th Congress of the. Hence, it is my humble opinion that the trial of the current impeachment case now pending before the Senate of the 19th Congress.
Pero you don't have to invoke like the analogy na false analogy or false equivalence ng korte to actually prove na it can carry over. Because I agree, it can carry over. Pero you don't have to use that analogy.
Congress
Kasi that's not where the problem is, okay?
can cross over or continue from the 19th Congress to the 20th Congress. The
It can.
impeachment docket of the Senate Impeachment Court continues and remains to be the same. So thank you very much, Mr. President, my dear colleagues, for your
Oh, ito na si Tol. Tol, you just make your own rules. That's it.
time and attention.
Thank you,
Ito na si
Senator
Tol.
Coco Pimentel,
Tol,
our
sayang
distinguished minority
Sayang talaga, Tol eh. Hindi ko makalimutan, Tol.
floor leader.
Although that was only a manifestation, I am willing to entertain questions. If there should there be any questions, Mr. President.
Just
Ito na.
questions with the permission of this body.
With the permission of the Honorable Pimentel, the gentleman may
Paano yan? Sabi dito Soto, hindi pwede mag-carry over from 19 to 28 Congress. Hindi nga. Teka lang, relax lang. May reason kung bakit hindi pwede. Pero the first answer is yes, it can. Okay.
proceed.
Mr. President, kanina po narinig ko yung historical antecedents ng
Totoo.
na binanggit.
Ang galing mo dyan, Tol, gagi. Kahit di ako bumoto, gusto ko tang iboto. Sorry. No, I'm serious. Kahit di ako bumoto, gusto ko itang iboto eh. Gagi. Sorry, Tol. Nasayangan lang talaga ako, Tol. Ang galing mo dito eh. Humanga ako sa'yo dito.
Yung historical antecedents na binanggit, Your Honor, Senator Pimentel, would the good gentleman agree?
Oh. Boss, sumagot na si... totoo ba? Ayan pala. Ito ba? Once again, file mo as a motion or lawsuit para matuloy ang debate. Ano sinasabi nito? May kukontent tayo mamaya, gagi. Oh. Sige. Teka.
Ngayon,
Teka. Download muna natin. Once again, file mo as a motion or a lawsuit para matuloy ang debate na yan. Debate na yan. Shoutout James Argentes. Salamat sa'yo. Hindi download ko na. Let's go.
That the reason why agree that the reason why the position of constitutionalists, textualists for that matter, on this issue is that the Constitution is silent as to the word carry over, crossover, continue. Meron po ba nakalagay sa Constitution, sa Saligang Batas ng Pilipinas, 1935, 1973, 1987 na carry over?
Mr. President, I will respond directly to the question. Wala po nakasulat doon that it shall carry over. Pero binanggit ko sa aking manifestation, wala talaga rin nakasulat doon that it cannot cross over.
So either way. So wala nakasulat, no express, no, na expressly walang sinabi. Hindi stipulated. So it means it is silent. It is silent about that topic. Which makes sense kung bakit silent.
So, in effect,
Siguro iniisip nila, I think this is common sense.
let us say textually, both positions are not even mentioned or entertained in the Constitution.
Mr. President, sangayon po kaya ang ating ginagalang na
So we
minority
circle, yeah.
leader na kaya dahil
Tol, ang galing mo dito, Tol. Gusto ko tang iboto kahit di ako bumoto.
walang carry-over notion ay dahil malaki po ang pagkakaiba. There's a big
Ang galing mo dito, gagi. Pabilib mo ko dito, Tol. Tol! There's a reason for that kung bakit silent. There is no carry over or crossover notion because of this.
difference between the 1987 Constitution and the 1935 Constitution, which was patterned after the United States Constitution.
Okay, ulitin natin yung argumento niya. Gagi, this is gold. This is gold. So, kaya silent is not because silent sa either way. It is silent because there's a reason for that. Okay?
And I would like
Silent in the sense na hindi pwede mag-carry over or walang salitang carry over because it cannot not function. But it can technically, but it cannot function. It is useless. Tama? Oh.
to have this placed on the records, Mr. President. Sa US Constitution, 100 po ang senador at nag-i-election po every 2 years
Correct.
ng 33 senators.
Correct.
Ang naiiwan pong senador sa Estados Unidos pag nag-i-eleksyon
67.
ay 67.
Correct.
Because 67 plus 33 is 100. 67 is sufficient to comply with the
Two-thirds.
provision of the US Constitution to convict in an impeachment case.
Yes! That is why walang nakalagay na crossover or carry over because it is useless to put it there. Because ang election natin is 12 senators sa mapapalitan. The 12 senators are seeking for re-election. Meaning, even if we say it can carry over, you only have 12 senators to actually either convict or acquit sa Duterte. Here's the problem. It cannot convict. 12, kahit nasabihin natin lahat yon ay to convict, it cannot convict. It can only acquit. That's why there's no carry-over idea here. Kahit mag-convince yung dead on arrival pa din, correct. So, kulang. Yes, that's the point. That's why sa kanila, it works. But it doesn't work here. Tayo nag-adapt. Dapat marunong din tayo mag-adjust. Naintindihan niyo yung argument niya, right? Kaya gusto ko siyang iboto kahit di ako bumoto Napabilib mo ako dito, Tol. Tol, ang galing mo dito, Tol. Una niyang tinanong, it's work of art. Question. Silent. Wala nakalagay express na carry over. Sabi niya, pero wala rin nakalagay na it cannot. Carry over. Because they don't have to put it there. They don't have to put na it cannot carry over. Because the consequence of it, if you actually continue it, is also useless. Because you cannot convict with 12. You can only acquit. That's why they don't have to put it there. Naintindihan yun? Nakita nyo kung gaano ka-beautiful yun. Yung argumentong yun. It's gold. Kundi lang sana pro-China mga Pinoy, no, tol? It's futile already because that's why they don't have to put it there. Because the natural consequence of it is you will be left with 12 senators. If you're going to continue it, yes, okay, fine. You continue it. You have 12 senator judges. Then what happens? Can you actually convict him? Convict VP Sara with 12 senators? You cannot. That's why it's a fool's errand. You're just wasting resources and energy. That's why they don't have to put it there. Because the natural consequence of it is you are left with 12 senators, not enough, not sufficient to convict. That's why they don't have to put it there. This is, dude, amazing. Not only that, meron pa siya bibigay historical na kung bakit ganon. Hindi ko na-gets ito kagabi, pero dito na-gets ko na, thank you. Ay, this is, nung narinig ko to, gagi, mas malakas yung argumento ni Tolentino. Sabi ko, di mag-impeachment kayo dyan, meron kayong 12 senator judges, para lang kayo naglandi dyan. Punta lang tayo ng, parade ng Pride Month. Joke lang. Punta lang tayo ng Pride Parade. Doon tayo manggulo. So in simple term, if carryover happens, it will always result to acquittal. Yes! That's why they don't have to put it there. Because it will always result to acquittal. Diba? Let's just go sa Pride Parade. Manggulo na lang tayo doon. Let's go. Pakinggan nyo to.
The US Constitution to convict in an impeachment 7 plus 33 is 100.
Correct.
67
That's why, because of this, yung sinabi ni Tolentino na yan, it actually demolishes not only the argument of Coco Pimentel, but also lahat ng citations ni Risa Hontiveros. Why? Because you got it from the US. But the system of US is different. Because they can always carry it over. Impeachment can always cross over. Because 67 is enough to convict. That's why it can carry over. It can cross over. And not only that, it makes sense na ganun yung design. Why? Because you will not, hindi mo ilalagay sa alanganin. Kasi mas delikado ka. Alam ng lower house yan and ni Coco. Kaya nga nila minamadali nung February pa lang na mag-convene. Yun nga. US din lagi citation ni MDS. But it doesn't work here now. Because we have a different system. You cannot import US system as package here. Kaya tama si Tol dito, gagi.
33 is 100.
Dati no 1935 yata, no 1935 or 1970s na constitution, pwede. Noong time na yon. Why? Because of the way the election was designed. Tama.
100.
Our math cannot math the same way dahil sa number of elected positions.
67 is
Gagi, nagsalita si Risa pagkatapos si Tol. Pinipilit pa rin yung US na argument, parang di tuloy nakikinig kay Tol. Yun nga eh, parang ang hina naman ni Risa Ontiveros. Yun nga yung argumento eh. Take the concept, adjust the rule. Correct. Sa US kasi, there is enough members from the previous Congress to comply with what is stipulated in the Constitution. Ours is different. Correct.
sufficient to comply with the provision of the US Constitution to convict
Correct.
in an impeachment case. Dahil 2/3 po yun ay 66,
7. 66, 67.
may sobra pang isa. Sa atin pong saligang batas noong 1935,
Ito na. Oh.
kung inyo pong susuriin, ang atin pong senador na bumubuo rin ng impeachment court ay 24.
Tama.
Subalit,
Okay.
Mr. President, in the 1935 Constitution, ang eleksyon po natin ay 8, 8, 8.
That's why it works there. In the 1935 Constitution, in that context, yung sinasabi mo na it can carry over, it will work. Because 20 can actually convict. Kasi 8 lang yung papalitan mo eh. Ay hindi, 8, 24, 8, so 16. 16 can actually convict. Kaya nga kailangan ng 9, di ba? Kaya nga kailangan ng 9 ni VP SARA para ma-acquit. It makes sense. So kung may mathematical equation ka to actually prove your point, mas lamang 'yon. Because that is the design. Kapag hahata lalo si Risa na sobrang sumisip-sip sa US gaya ng sinasabi ni Atty. Trixie para sa papalapit na 2028 election. Pero nag-gets niyo yung point, right? Noong 1935 Constitution, ang pagboto, ang mga senators that actually seek for re-election were only 8 every election. So 16 can actually convict. No, kailangan na 16 para ma-acquit kasi kung may abstain it's like acquit. No, yung importante yung hindi acquit. What do you mean? 16 para ma-convict. Oo nga, yan nga sinabi ko, Paps Chulo. Inuulit mo lang yung sinabi ko eh. 16 nga. 16 is enough. Bakit sa acquit ka nagbibilang? At kasi kayo, di nyo na lang hinintay next Congress. The math is mathing now, yes. Now it's clear, right? Sana na ipaliwanag ko sa inyo na maayos, right? Here's the argument. Can it carry over? Yes, it can. Theoretically. Why? Because the 12 senators, old senators can actually judge, but they cannot convict. That's why carrying it over is actually useless. That's why they don't have to put there that it cannot carry over or cross over, because it's a fool's errand. You cannot convict with 12. You can only convict with 16. So, they don't have to put it there. And in practice pa, noong 1935, na Constitution, ang pinapalitan lang ay 8. Yun yung mga nagsisik na re-election, yung 8. It means, nung time na yon, 16 can actually convict. That's why they can cross over. Even in the US, 100, papalitan yung 33 every 2 years. They can still convict. That's why it makes sense. The reason it is actually useless to cross over Because you cannot convict with 12. I mean, SARA doesn't need 9 to be acquitted. Prosecution needs 16. Ayan din yun eh. Ayusin mo nga yung mat mo, Paps Chulo. Hindi ka nag-almusal, no? Oh, tanggalin mo yung isa sa 9. Ilan yon? O di 16. Ang labo mo naman eh. Paps Chulo naman eh. She needs 9. Kasi nga, yung isa doon, ay 16. Ikaw naman eh. Salamat, Fredo Bay. If both parties, the defense and prosecution, have enough evidence and excellent arguments, baka naman we can arrive to just fair decision for the senators, but then grandstanding yung iba dyan. Kahit na nga perfect conviction na nga yung 12. Not enough pa rin kasi 24. Gawin na lang nilang 36 na senators next time. Yes, numbers game da. Yun yung argument.
Tuwing mag-i-eleksyon ng senador, 8, 8, 8. Tuwing mag-i-eleksyon ng senador, ang i-elect na senador kasama sa mga kongresista ay 8 senador lamang. Ang may iwan po ay 16.
Mhm. Correct din naman nila matatapos yan before June 30. Pa din boboto dyan.
And 16 is 2/3. Enough to have a quorum as well as to convict or to acquit. In our present constitutional scheme, 1987 Constitution, we also have 24 senators, but we conduct elections every 3 years for 12 senators. Meaning to say, Mr. President, yung may iwang kalahati na 12 is not sufficient to constitute a quorum, dahil 12, dapat 13, much more convict. Because to convict, you need 16
Correct.
senators, Mr. President. Is it now the proposition of the good minority leader that the constitutional spirit as enshrined in the 1935 Constitution, the same as the spirit prevailing, although it is not as admitted by the good minority leader, textually enshrined, the same as the 1935? Ibig sabihin po ba yung 12 ay may quorum? Yung 12 ay may pwedeng maging 2/3?
Ah, tingnan mo ribat dito ni Pimentel.
Allow your notion that we can carry over at
Yun yung argument niya. If it's possible, then it can carry over. It can cross over. But it cannot because you only have 12.
yung sikat nga yung salita, maitawid. Tama po ba yun, Mr. President?
Ako, Mr. President, yung 2/3 kasi is actually that was probably just the decision of the framers of the Constitution. They could have made it 1+1. They could have made it 3/4. So it's
Yeah, that's not answering the question. I'm sorry. For some reason, you are trying to downplay the brains, the intelligence of the framers. So for some reason, they could have do it like this, they could have do it like that. So are you saying that hindi pinag-isipan ng mga framers yan? Oh, come on. Really? Aren't you insulting the framers of the Constitution? And they could have done it like 3, 4, 5, 6, 12. Hindi ginamit ko kote ni Coco. Wala. Ayun yung ribat niya. They could have, but they didn't. Ginawang subjective. Ginawang subjective.
maybe by accident na 2/3
Maybe by accident.
is equal to 8 plus
That's
8.
not a good argument, Coco. Tolentino just burn you alive. Yun ang argumento mo. They did not think that far ahead. So, ang aribat mo kay Tolentino, I don't think they thought that far ahead. Maybe they're drinking. They have a drinking session while they're doing the Constitution. We don't know. Maybe some of them were, you know, nag-weeds. Top notcher ka, Coco. Ilaban mo naman. Oo nga. Top notcher by accident din. The law is not accidental. We're talking about the Constitution. And you're just telling us, yung design dati ng 8, ngayon ay 12, by accident, binago. Ganito ha, ang argumento mo, Coco, na top notcher. Ang argumento mo, dating 8 by 8 by 8, yun yung botohan, eleksyon, senators, right? Sinasabi mo, binago nila yon kasi trip lang nila. So, binago nila yon for some reason. We don't like that design. Gawin natin, dagdagan natin. 12. Bakit 2/3? Trip lang nila.
Eight-fourths. So it's maybe by accident that 2/3 is equal to 8 plus 8 is 16 is 2/3, so 24.
Pero kung shoot, miski sa US, pati kung paano nagwo-work, hindi yun by accident. By accident yun, yung 2/3. You know, you cannot expect too much from the framers of the Constitution. Basta yun. Alam nyo na yung argumento. I think this is the strongest argument against sa pagko-crossover ng impeachment. Okay? Because technically, theoretically, you can cross over. But the problem is there's no enough senator judge to actually convict. That's why it's actually futile to actually pursue that crossover because it's not enough to convict. That's why they don't have to put it there that it cannot cross over because it is useless. Tapos si Risa Ontiveros, kung ano-ano na pang citation ang ginawa sa US, iba nga. Yun nga yung buong point, yung foundation ng tirahin mo. God bless sa inyong lahat. Nico David tayo next.
Lord, wag yakan channel. Panare. Ayoko ng tahimik, ayoko ng pa-cute. Gusto ko ng laban, hindi yung puro mute. Mga kwento sa Senado parang teleserye. Ako ang bida, wag nyo kong maliitin. Sige, lahat ng lihim, ilabas nyo na. Ilawan ang